Welcome to my seminar. In the seminar, I'm explaining a bit about audio production on Linux. I'm giving a brief introduction, describing the system that's working underneath, describing setting up some typical applications, and also introducing some applications you've probably never heard about, which should be the equivalents to something you've maybe seen on Windows. And I conclude with things that are missing and which distro to take. All right. So the first question is probably, why should I use Linux at all? Why should I do music on Linux? Honestly, I'm not so sure. But one of the reasons definitely that it's freely available. So you can just download it and check it out and don't have to do much to get hold of it. And there's a shitload of applications that you can try. Another point is that the applications that you're using, even if they might be a bit complicated or hard to set up, which is usually, which is very normal, they never change too much. Maybe you recognize from some commercial software that when they go to the next generation, they changed half of the stuff and they haven't even asked you. So this is usually, those applications stay the way they are, and if they get any different, they usually make a new program out of it or a new major version, and the old one can be continued. It's possible to continue with the old one and fix the old one. And most of the time, most programs are split up into a stable version and into the top-notch version, and the stable version is fixed and being corrected, and the top-notch version is being improved, new features are being introduced, new bugs, and yeah, that's it. The programs you can use them commercially. That means if you do something, if you have a contract, you're doing music for money, for example, which might happen at some point. If you're using commercial software, and let's say you have a temporary license or something of that, and you want to do commercial stuff with it, someone is going to knock on your door and ask you where the license is. And if you always carry non-commercial or free software with you, then there's no problem with that. All right. So I'm starting with some of the basics of the system, so you better understand why it's set up like it's set up. ALSA is the Advanced Linux Sound Architecture. It's basically consisting of two parts. It has a kernel driver API. I'm not going in too much detail. It has an API for drivers, so ALSA also supports writing drivers for sound cards. And on the other hand, on the user part, it supports writing clients using those drivers. And for programmers, it's very easy to use and not as complicated as the Windows equivalents. It has a bit of Windows MMS, a multimedia system, which was the first introduction to an audio system with MIDI support that they never changed or improved afterwards. It basically is still in the state it was back with Windows 3.0 or 3.1, I think they introduced it. And it has something of direct sound, but not. It's not so complicated to set up a sound output. And ASIO, which is the professional audio standard introduced by Steinberg, which supports low latency for artists. Yeah, and it supports audio and MIDI. It has built-in support for USB MIDI devices. I brought one with me. At the moment I plug it in, I can usually see that it's working. I'm firing up an application that's called QJack Control. It's basically controlling the ALSA MIDI part. There is ALSA has a part that's only for MIDI sequencing, and it's very extensive, supports a lot of stuff that usually people have to put in their applications. It's already provided by the system, and that's the ALSA sequencer engine, and you can also control it from here. You have here a list of global devices that provide MIDI input and output, and when I plug in the USB MIDI device, then I'm seeing a new device, and that new device provides an input and an output for MIDI. So if I start any application that's supporting MIDI, it's also coming up here, and I can route the MIDI applications into each other with that. So I have a global way of attaching instruments to each other, much more like in a real studio. Which also has its drawbacks, but I'm coming to that later. Yeah, it supports low latency, which is actually no big magic. It's just that the Windows guys made it so complicated that they didn't even thought about low latency. So MMS has very bad latency. Direct sound is, you get something about the 100 millisecond range, best of 50 milliseconds, but not better. And ASIO is providing very good support for that, but it has the problem that the CPU load goes high pretty early, and it's using a lot of CPU. Going below the 5 millisecond range uses a lot of CPU power, and they've been thinking about this when they wrote ALSA, and also when they wrote Jack. The Jack is short for Jack Audio Connection Kit, which is a daemon for professional audio. You can compare it somehow to providing the functionality of ASIO in a global wide system. On Windows, it's more like you're using a central host like Cubase or Buzz or something else, and there you load all the plugins. On Linux, it's more like you start individual applications and you use Jack to interconnect them, and it's basically what you do on this panel. At the moment I have not any application started, but I could, for example, for a very stupid example actually, could just start up XMMS. That's kind of like Winamp. So I have Jack started, so I have inputs, that's the capture from the mic, and that's the output channels, and I could directly route them to the output channels. To have an example, I have no idea if it's working right now. Oh, it's not working. Yeah, usually I have a volume control here that got lost. It's somewhere at the right, but I can reach it. Where is it? Ha.
This is working.
Yeah, but I have no idea if it's actually. Yeah,
Now it's coming through the.
I'm disconnecting it.
I'm connecting it, and
There's a signal, and I can put any applications in between to modify the signal. At first, I'm making the stupid example of XMMS also has an output for Jack for supporting this interconnection. If you're just using ALSA, then you're directly using the driver and you're just having direct audio output. So that's what most applications want. But when you're working with audio audio production, you want to have this routing to have some more control. And yep. So as soon as I start this, should come up and automatically connect the outputs. This would be a very stupid example, just cross connection exchanging left and right channel, for example. You could actually do something more sophisticated with the Jackrack. That is, I should think I said everything. I should say more about QJack control before I start with that one, because that's on the next panel. QJack control is basically, someone wrote it to have an easier interface to controlling all the stuff that's possible with Jack and with ALSA. You have the MIDI part where you can exchange the MIDI stuff, but that has nothing to do with Jack. And you have the audio stuff where you actually do the Jack routing. And you also have the ability to set up patch bays and save those in an XML format, so you can later on load these and automatically connect all applications that you have currently started to get your old setup. I noticed that I forgot something. And that's where the first bug slips in. This application has a problem with saving the presets. I have to set up this every time. I bet it's my fault. But I'm not precisely sure where it is. Alright, so. Because when I'm not doing this, I'm getting a priority problem, and it's taking too much CPU and it's being blocked by all kind of other processes. So now I'm giving it the most room on my system. As you can see, it's currently, I could actually increase the frame period. That's 1024 samples. You would want something like this. I think I can't go lower because that's the fault of my sound card, because it's actually just a built-in onboard NFOS thingy, and it's basically working now with 256 samples, which you usually only get with some expensive Arduo cards. And yeah, someone thought about this, and now it's working much better, and it's not using much CPU when it's not doing anything at all. So that's only the CPU load the whole audio thing has. As soon as you connect something in here and it's doing something on the CPU, the usage is going to grow, so you can always see how much it's currently using. So alright, now I show some of the applications I wrote here down. The first would be Jackrack, because it's offers a good demonstration how this patch thing works. It already comes up here as a new client. Could try this one. Although I think it's not so impressive. We could try it.
Blah blah.
Is something coming out? I don't know.
Blah blah.
Yep, it is. So when I lower the cutoff, it should be more damp. Okay. I don't know. Either it's playing from the real part or not. Okay, then just imagine that it would work. So this is basically how it looks. The capturing goes into the rack. The rack has, I added one effect to it, and this effect routes into the actual output. And yeah, about the effect stuff, there is something like VST and VSTi on Linux that's also being generalized, and it's an open standard. The equivalent to VST to effects is called LATSPA, which stands for Linux Audio Developer Simple Plugin API. Really. And it's the interface to do some real-time or offline audio processing. You can download a big, there's already a big repository of available plugins that are more or less useful depending on what you want to do. And it's quite easy to get someone to write you one. If you are a coder, the interface is very easy to understand. Not as much as the VST interfaces, which are quite complicated. I think the only reason that most people are writing stuff for it is that it would then run in most hosts and maybe some commercial interest, but it's not really because it's fun to do it. So yeah, that's actually a lot of this stuff. And the equivalent to VSDI is DSSI, which I forgot what it stands for, but I guess it's something equally complicated. And this is the whole thing for instruments. So hosts which supports DSSI plugins can use them. There's, for example, kinda too small. Yeah, this is very trivial in the SSI. What you're looking at here is an application I'm currently working on with some very experimental features. I'm not going into detail about it because it's not done at all, and it's at 0.0.5 currently, the version number. So there's still a lot missing, and it's only available for Linux, but I'm trying to port it to Windows as well, which is a bit hard because under Windows it requires a tremendous effort to get stuff working. All right. I would have thought that this would work from the start, but it doesn't. I know. Yep. Yeah, so that's basically an application that I wrote that basically does the same thing that this thing here does, but in a different way. So that when you drag in an instrument, it's being played on the output, which is basically this circle, and this is an input circle, so it could represent the microphone. And when I drag it over here, I get the microphone input, which is quite noisy, which I don't understand yet. And yeah, the show is over. And yeah, okay. There's also a sequencer application that is quite, yeah, it's quite for purists, called SEC24. It's for people who still know Cubase back from the Atari. It's very much alike. They have a very cool concept of doing this. And it's basically, it's quite cool. The problem is that contrast on this monitor is quite high, so I can't see the fine lines here. It allows you to do this or some recording. The problem is that I don't have enough space to show you the very important stuff on the bottom right of this dialog. Which basically enables you to route. SEC24 actually doesn't host any instruments. It's only playing and recording MIDI. And it comes up as its own client in this window, which at the moment it does because I can't reach the button. And then you can route it into a standalone host, like for example, Specimen, which is a sample, and control it from here. Yeah, I would like to show more of this. The guy who made this has an interesting concept. You can use it in a live mode where you have the individual patterns line up here, it's called 24 because it's exactly 24 boxes. And you have also the arrangement mode where you can I guess it's also somewhere here. You have also the arrangement mode where you can actually take all the boxes you've been working on, the patterns, and put them into a line just like in Cubase. Another application that I just mentioned is Specimen. It's a sampler application. It can't do too much, but it's still very usable. It was usable. Okay, maybe I could kill some of the...
Drag it out.
What?
Hold down Alt and drag it out. Move the mouse down a bit.
Somewhere in the window.
Yeah, there. Yeah, it should.
Move the mouse to the center of the window, hold down Alt and drag up. Go down. Alt, click.
Yeah, if it would work. Yeah, it doesn't work, but okay. I could try it with this window down. Yeah, this is the sequencer part that I wanted to show you. I was actually planning to do some basic layouting, but with the current setup, it's a bit hard. So okay, this is Specimen. It allows to where have I? Okay, it allows to set up patches like in the usual sampler that you used to, and unfortunately per patch it only allows one sample, and the guy who's developing it dropped it. He's no longer working on it. The source code is waiting for someone to pick it up. It's quite usable in the range it is, but a lot of stuff is missing. Like for example, this dialog is quite old. There's a better one, and Linux is constantly improved. There are the stuff you're basically moaning about yesterday is fixed tomorrow, but in between it's horrible. But once it works, the stuff that works is really fun to use. Okay, I was about to... Something from here. Yep. So this is how it works. It also provides setting up some loops. Okay, for example, here. Yep. And it has these fancy controls. This is part of library for audio controls. And they made this up to provide some fine-grained setting up of values. The usual problem when a slider bar is not as big as you want. So the idea is that if you want some more fine-grained control over it, you can drag it out and then have a more finer way to use it. And this way you can use it very fast, and this is more slower. Okay. So the usual setup is that you connect SEC24 to Specimen, through Jackrack, for example, and set something up with that. The problem is with that setup is that it's very like a real studio. Like you would do it in a real studio. You have the sampler box and you have the effect rack and you connect everything with cables, but that has been the standard 20 years ago. And I know that a lot of musicians wish to work like this, but it's also quite complicated. That's just my personal point of view. You get into really practical problems when you're trying to synchronize all this. I'm getting to this later on. There is also a very powerful hard disk recording program called Arduo. I hope I'm spelling it out, speaking it out correctly. Yeah. This is the version, this is the 1.0 series you're looking at, so it's a bit ugly because he's still using the old X Windows libraries and not GTK2 as in the new version. 2.0 has all the fancy controls and blends finely in with all the other styles on the system. And this is basically where you can do all the recording. You can have a setup like have multiple hosts here routing into Arduo, and in Arduo you can record each line separately at the same time. Oh, all right. Okay, there are other applications. For example, Rose Garden is much more like the Cubase you're used to. It's not working on my system, and I find it less interesting than working with SEC24 because it's it's too much like Cubase, and I wanted to try something new. So you might give Rose Garden a shot. It also had some stability problems when I last checked, but it's under continuous development. One advantage you have when you work under Linux is that you can always reach the developers directly through mailing lists or through IRC. For example, a guy who's working on Arduo, he is sitting on IRC all day. You can just go in and ask him questions or shout at him or say thank you. But the most important is that you get direct support also from a lot of people. When you go to IRC, check out irc.freenode.net and go to, for example, Arduo, to the channel Arduo and talk to Lars, that's him. And also for all other applications, you can always directly talk to them. You couldn't do that with the Steinberg guys. You would have problems getting through customer support to actually call a coder. And Hydrogen is a drum machine, a very complex drum machine. Looks very good. But actually, when you look at it, it looks so done and ready and all, and you would wish that it would do more than a it would be more than a drum machine. The problem with this is that it's also needing more screen space than I can give it right now. But that's it basically. So as you can see from here, it's looking very cute and nice and all, and it's also quite usable. And and the only thing it can do is do drum loops. They have some very interesting demos on their website. There are some sample packages, and it's you can download it for free. The sample editor I'm currently using is called Rezone. It's also available for free. I use it to cut up samples, and it complains because when Jack is active, all normal ALSA applications can't work anymore because it's using the system exclusively. So this is, yeah. Yeah, so it helps to tweak loops with it, and it's a very good editing program. And it's all kind of very nice stuff. And currently, I prefer to cool edit or other applications. All right. So there's also Beast, which tries to be some kind of buzz, just call a buzz replacement, but they had some heavy stability problems. I wanted to show it, but it crashed all the time, and the code base needs some serious fixing. And I've been talking to them, and it doesn't seem like this project is going very far. There's also Pure Data, which is more an experimental application. It allows, basically you click your audio DSP code together. You can have sine generators, oscillators. It's like a just call a buzz in very, very complicated. The equivalent to it is Max MSP on the Mac, which is a commercial program, and PD is basically from the same guy, his second program based on this idea, and it's being openly developed. It understands all major plugin formats, and you could give it a try. It looks a bit rusty, but might be fun to play around with it. I didn't find so much of a practical use for it for a daily music making use, but still very interesting. And there's Terminator X, which is a scratching application. You can load samples or tracks in it and scratch on them and record that. And there are also interfaces to build your own Terminator X enabled turntable. They have some photos on that on the homepage. It looks very fancy. And yeah, all these applications are available for free. You can just go on and download them as soon as you have a Linux installation. What is missing? I've been saying that there's this problem of you have a session with multiple applications, all processes are running individually. That's great. When one crashes, you can just start it again. You didn't lose all your work. The problem is that when you're saving your session, you have to go to each program and save the session for each program individually in the format that the program understands. Now, when you start up the next time, you have to start up your patches, start up the programs that you use, load the patches, and then you can finally go, which just takes too long. And there is a solution for that that's called Linux Audio Session Handling, in short, LASH, which tries to fix that, but it requires individual support from the application. Sec24 supports it. Some others are going to build it in. It's basically, as we speak, they're going to do this. And yeah, the problem is that this is only going to be perfect when all applications understand it. But the guy who's working on LASH is also strongly behind it and writing patches and sending it to developers of individual applications. So they're working on this. And there's also stability issues that I mentioned. Several programs have severe problems that you work with them and they just went away and you don't know what's going on. That's basically the part where you gotta find the developers, subscribe to a mailing list, write to them. That's basically the deal. You get the program for free, but if you want improvement, you have to provide feedback and talk to them. That's so far what I think the major problems, and as soon as those are worked out, everything will work very fine. Okay, what distro to use? I think when you're starting with Linux and you have not much of an experience, then Ubuntu Linux is basically currently the way to go. I've looked at several distributions, and this distribution comes pretty close to what you'd expect when you're used to Windows. It has a graphical installation. It has the usual desktop. It has some pre-installed application. It's all the system controls. You can everything set up from the GUI, and they also have a live CD, so you can just download the live CD, plug that in, and try it out. And yeah, that's it. So you said I have 10 minutes left. How far is it now? 3. Okay, thank you for being here. yeah. Yeah, I hope I've showed you some of the stuff that's available. You got an idea of where this is all heading. I hope I made you gain interest into working with Linux, and you have some insights, and yeah, that's it.